Catalyst 2030 started life as a WhatsApp group among social entrepreneurs, connecting to envision real transformational change. Launched at the World Economic Forum in January 2020, it's grown into a global movement accelerating change to ensure the SDGs are reached by 2030. Fueled by passion, our 550 members working in 175 countries have collectively put in an amazing 50,000 volunteer hours, touching the lives of 2 billion people. And we're driven by values, to which we hold ourselves accountable. 2020 was a busy year, co-creating 3 reports with partners and producing one of our own. Inviting high-level guests to participate in the Catalyzing Change campaign, hosting fireside chats and expert hours, which will be continuing in 2021. To celebrate our achievements, together we placed our supporters in the limelight with the first Catalyst 2030 Awards for Systemic Change. With the blessing of the Dalai Lama, we celebrated finalists and winners in the following categories: special recognition for our early supporters, individual philanthropists, donor organizations, philanthropic intermediaries, corporate organizations, bi- and multilateral organizations, and 4 regional winners in the category of national governments. And now on to Catalyzing Change Week 2021. During this social entrepreneur-led event, we bring together diverse stakeholders in over 100 sessions to showcase their systems change efforts and the best practices that can accelerate our work in pursuit of the SDGs.
Warm welcome, everyone. If it's very early, as we have our friend from Canada on, or very late in the world, I'm Lisa Witter, the co-founder of Apolitical, and a person who has dedicated a lot of my life, as many of you have, to ending violence against women and girls. It's such an honor to be with you all. Before we start and get in, a couple things. One, this is going to be recorded, so please know that. And I'd like to make this human, because all of us who work on these issues, who are working on the SDGs, we do this for our love of people, commitment to people, for the real human connection. So if people could go into gallery view for just a minute, turn on your camera, and actually wave like real human beings, as if we were at a conference. Remember when that happened? Where we would wave at each other, like, and look people in the eyes and smile at one another, and doing this hard work. You have to be driven by this intrinsic connection that we feel with people. So I see Karen and Diana and Pamela and Cecilia and Jad, and Vinay. It's so good to see you all. And if you can also, you can keep your video on or you can turn it off. We understand it's COVID. We have our friends from India here that are dealing with such an outbreak. We also have friends who may have kids in the background, or dogs or birds. You may say my dog later. That's all real and human. So just like, that's cool. Just try to be muted if you can, so we can listen to folks. If you haven't yet, please do put your name, where you're from, and the organization in the chat, just to get a sense of who's here. What's the background? I think we so I see here Stella from Bonn. I'm in Berlin. We have Louise from Tanzania, Mauritius, lots of people from around the world, and again a Canadian who is up. I don't even know what time it is, but way too early. So France, we have, hello Pamela from France. So do introduce yourself in that chat, because one of the things that we want to do at Catalyst 2030 is really build that community and collaborate, and you can't if you don't get a sense of who is in the room. So let me just set up a little bit more context for why we're here. As you all know, we are racing. I feel with COVID, time is going so fast for some. I'm sure it's slower for others, towards 2030, and a global commitment across all of the Sustainable Development Goals, or some people say global goals. And obviously, all of them are important. And today, what we're here to talk about, how ending violence against women and girls can really help accelerate other parts of the agenda. And so we have 4 experts from around the world to share their experience, everywhere from philanthropy to the WHO, to researchers, to practitioners on the ground. each one of these extraordinary people know that they are not the only experts in the world on this, and really would welcome your insights and inputs, both in the chat, but also when we go into our breakout rooms, because it's the time to get to know one another and share. So very, very excited to be doing this. So let's start off with our first poll question. If you've joined us, 40 beautiful people from around the world. Hello, Sunil. Do put into the chat your name, your organization, and where you're from. We have Lebanon here. Go ahead, Mariana, put up the first poll question. So how do you think about ending violence against women and girls as it relates to your own organizational mission? Every day, it's what we do. So is this a group of mostly people who this is their core? Is it we work on it, but it's only in special projects or approaches, or I don't, but I'm here to learn how we might do that? So the results will be coming in. If there's, thanks, Pamela. If there's an other, you can go ahead. There's always those people. Great. Put it in the chat what that other is. We'll really want to hear that. Sunil says he works at Breakthrough, so probably had no choice to come. I'm just kidding. You're here to support your colleague, Sunil. And I know their executive director would love to be here as well, but is resting and taking care of her health. Hello, Somai. We've got 73% of you have voted. We'll give you a few more seconds. If there is that other, Pamela, I'm curious what you put in the chat for other. Personal value. So I do it through volunteering in various organizations. Fantastic. Pamela, could you put in the chat where and maybe what organization? That would be great. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop up those results. Mariana, what do we have? So for nearly 70% of you, every day it's core. You can see 23% of you said only during special projects. And then 8%, two of you said, I'm here to learn more to bring it in. So all of this, actually, all of you are important for different reasons to this conversation, because one, communicating about this together is important, but also learning how those who aren't working on this more could perhaps bring that in. Hello, Anna from Poland, Priya from the South Asian Women's Fund in India, of Breakthrough. Fantastic. Okay, so now what I do is turn to our speakers. And what I asked as I introduced them, I know all of them have a story about why they work on violence against women and girls. So I asked them just to make it a bit more personal and to have our feet on the ground. Kind of, Pamela, you're talking about your own values driving this. Ask them each when I introduce them to say one thing about their background that's not in their bio that has shaped how they think about working on either violence against women or social change in general. So Claudia Garcia Moreno from the WHO, who I could give you her title, but the most important thing you need to know about Claudia is she's the little engine that has created a big engine that could. That may not make sense in your culture, but it basically means, I don't know if that translates, but that basically means she is inside and has been really, really pushing for women and girls within WHO, inside a large institution, a real entrepreneur of this work. So Claudia, what's something in your bio that isn't obvious that drives you?
Thank you, Lisa. You always make me think with these questions. I am a second child, but the oldest girl of a family of 7. I have 4 brothers, and I experienced gender inequality in multiple forms firsthand, as well as witnessed some violence. So I think that's what drives me in this work, or one of the many things that drive me in this work. That is not in my bio.
Yeah, deeply personal, right? That personal connection. And thank you, Claudia. I'm sure that's painful. And we know there may be people on this call who've experienced or witnessed it. So I want to really recognize that and hold that, which is why we're here to do the work. So thank you, Claudia, for making that real. Next, I'd like to introduce Radha, who has the coolest last name, Wickremasinghe. Did I do it right? Oh, not so well. So you can correct me. I'm fine to be wrong. Radha is with the Ford Foundation, and her work at Ford is focusing on the importance of addressing VOG. And she's going to talk later about the role of philanthropy in this. But Radha, what's in your background that drives you to do this work? Or it doesn't have to be your own personal story, but maybe you were like a champion ping pong player. I don't know. And so you like strategy. So Radha.
Thanks, Lisa. So no, I'm not a champion ping pong player, but the one thing that's not in my bio is that I come from an ancestor worshipping community in South India and from a strong line of matriarchs. And my great grandmother was married at 16, she was widowed at 20, and she raised 4 children single-handedly. She was strong, she was gentle, but she also kept a gun under her bed. And, I think that's, and so a lot of the women in my life and my ancestors, women ancestors, inspire me, and their experiences shape and have shaped me. So
that's a visual that I think we'll all keep with us, Radha, of your grandmother with a gun under her bed. It's not something that it still exists now, I'm sure, in many places in the world, which is why we're here. So thank you, Radha. Sanam, Amin, welcome, Sanam. You are a researcher, so you've dedicated a lot of your life to researching this. So we know this about your bio, but what's not in your background that shapes how you do your work? She's either thinking.
Well, it's hard to follow gun under the bed, but when you shared this question, Lisa, I thought of the fact that I both studied art and do a lot of art, and something that from my art history courses that really struck me is that violence against women presents itself even in art. And my example of that I was really struck by, I'm going to share a link in the chat, is of a painting that is not even 100 years old. It was done in 1927. And you see the artist himself, he's called it a self-portrait. His lover is in the background, and there's a scar on her face. And the description of the artwork says that this is a fregio that was done to women by their lovers to mark possession. And I saw that artwork in the Tate, and I was just shocked that, it's just presented as, oh, this is something that was traditional and done. And I feel like that's one aspect of that's one interest that I have and thing that I do that shapes how encompassing violence against women is and how it shapes our whole world.
Thank you. And you have the most artistic background that I see on the Zoom call. So it seems like art is a really important part of fueling your work. You see that beautiful feminists want systems change with the butterflies and beautiful flowers in the midst of the hard work that everyone does in this space. Last but definitely not least, and big thanks to the folks at Breakthrough and Urvashi, if you could wave Urvashi, who has brought us all together. It's hard work, right? It's the people behind the scenes bringing this together. We need to celebrate and really thank. Nanya Chowdhury. Nanya, you're with Breakthrough. We're going to get a little bit more into this, but what about your background drives you and has formed you in this work?
Okay, first of all, my name is Noyona.
Noyona.
Yeah, so my name is Noyona, and I work with Breakthrough. And when I was hearing Claudia and I was hearing Radha, I thought there is something. I'm the second child, but second of 3 girls. Probably my parents were expecting a boy, and they were just trying out. And like Radha's great-grandmother, my mother was married at 16. She had her first child at the age of 17. So these are, of course, part of me. But one thing that I want to mention is this, that whatever I have become, most of my friends, when I go back to, I come from a very small city, and I am a laborer's daughter. So it's only because of a support system that was present, which was given by the government at that point in time, that I have been able to study and come out and establish myself as a woman who's standing on her own feet. So that's not there in my background, in my bio, which inspires me every day. I think the great feminists have done a lot for me. For them, I'm here, and I want to make it easier for the women to come. So that's my inspiration.
Thank you very much. I know many of you, there's a parallel, obviously, process. So it's an integrated process with the SDGs around generation equality. If you could put in the chat, actually, if you're working on something related to generation equality, and one of the 6 action coalitions is violence against women and girls. So there's a lot of energy and excitement right now on really putting feminist values forward. And I know many people on this call are working on that. So now we want to get to you, and we're going to do breakout groups, but I want to do it with a prompt. So we promised in our title that the purpose of this was to see how ending violence against women and girls, how it's a driver to all the SDGs. So I asked each of our panelists to prepare one word to describe this connection. So Claudia, I'll start with you. In a word, summarize how you see the connections between ending violence against women and girls and all 17 SDGs in a word, and then we'll come back.
My word was inextricable.
Inextricable. Okay,
Inextricable.
Inextricable.
Which means that you cannot separate it, like it's intertwined.
Intertwined, inextricable. You can almost see the art of that, Sanam. I'll go over to you.
Intersectional, because our work should be intersectional.
In every way, right? Fantastic. Radha?
My word is contingent.
Ooh, okay, contingent. I want you all to be hearing these words, taking them in, because you're going to take this into the breakout and talk about what your word is and how this fits to your work. And Nanya, did I say it right again? I'm so bad with
No, it's okay.
names.
Don't worry about my name. Yeah, it's very difficult to take names. I think my word is mainstreaming, talking about it every day.
Great. Okay. Great. So we had inextricable, intersectional, contingent, and mainstreaming. Okay, so now we're going to put you into breakout groups. This is a great leadership moment. So one of you, you're going to be in groups of 4 or 5. One of you take control of the conversation in a feminist loving way and hear from everyone about what their word is. And we're going to come back and pop it into the chat. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes. So thanks to all of you who will participate. Over to you all. Well, I don't know about you, but I had a very rich session, and it was so rich that it cut someone off. So sorry about that. That's the way that it goes. Let's go ahead and if you can get the chat open. A couple things were happening in my session, and hopefully were yours, but we were sharing our words. So if you could put the word that either sort of described what you thought, this word that describes how important ending violence against women is, put that in the chat so we can watch that come in. But then also there was a beginning of sharing, this is how we do it. This is how we integrate this into the work we do. And so there were people saying, this is a program, or we approach it this way. So people want to start putting links to the chats. That's really good, because remember, Catalyst 2030 is really about the collaboration and sharing, and we don't need to recreate the wheel, and it's good to get inspiration from this. So pop those words in the chat, and we will come back, and I'll comment that about them, maybe call on some folks as we go. So welcome to anyone. I see the numbers have popped up a little bit, so welcome to any new folks who have joined. Integrated and core issues, fantastic. Interdependence, yeah. Entangled, fantastic. Thanks, Julia. Independent, inclusivity, interconnected, great. Fundamental, intersectoral, cross-sectoral, great. Thanks for that. Keep them coming. Thanks, Laura. Nice to see you here. So I want to hear a little bit more from the depth of experience, or more from the depth of experience of our panelists. Again, a deep recognition to all of you for the expertise that you bring to this conversation as well. So Claudia, you're at the WHO, and obviously the WHO has a health lens, many others, but one. And so I want to talk about sexual and reproductive health and rights. That's the topic that we're looking at in this. It's definitely integral to Goal 5 of the SDGs, and imperative for gender equality. How would you place violence against women in the context of sexual rights and sexual and reproductive health rights and services, and what have been the major hurdles and doing that, and sort of what's worked, what national and global policies have integrated this very well from around the world. So Claudia, over to you. You're muted, Claudia.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, first of all, just to say that, linking to the previous question, the SDG 3 on health is ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. And clearly, you cannot have that if you don't address violence against women. We know, and we've documented well, in our own work, the multiple impacts of violence on women's health and well-being, and furthermore on the health and well-being and development of their children, starting with pregnancy. So there's a very sort of important and circular, and one of the reasons why health services are important, one is clearly that it's connected with a lot of health problems, both mental and physical, but often women will not disclose when they come to a health service, even if they're coming there for things that are related to the violence. And we know that most women will come into contact with sexual and reproductive health services at some point in their life, be it because they're seeking contraception, post-abortion care, antenatal care, maternal health care, or because they're taking their children to be immunized. So that most women will come into contact with the health care at some point, and in some places it may be the only place where one can go alone, or where they can go safely. So it provides a really important opportunity for early identification and support to women, and as a minimum provide what we call a first line support, which involves empathetic listening, validating, identification of needs, and referral to other support services that may be needed. So, every encounter with the health center or a health provider is a potential opportunity to mitigate impacts, to do some prevention, And we know that a well-trained provider can really help women in their pathway to healing and recovery. Having said that, a lot of health encounters at the moment remain missed opportunities. And even worse, they can be a place where women are re-victimized or are put at risk. So we still have a long way to go in ensuring that there's that services that are survivor-centered, that are safe, that are empathetic, validating, and trauma-informed are available and accessible. And we really need to, and as sexual and reproductive health providers and services are a really good entry point. They're not the only ones. Mental health also, you know, emergencies because injuries are also one of the consequences of violence. But you know, SRH services are a really good entry point. There are many policies, national policies that recognize violence as an integral component of SRH services, but in many other settings, it's still a very siloed approach. And there are still challenges in getting healthcare providers and health policymakers to really take up violence fully. I mean, it's still seen in many places as a criminal justice issue. And we were starting to discuss in our group, we didn't quite fit, you know, we were starting to have a discussion about how challenging it is when there's so many competing priorities to put these issues on the agenda, and how often we still see gender issues as a sort of add-on. You know, someone in the group was, you know, you have a non-communicable disease policy, and then kind of gender stuck in as an afterthought rather than having a policy that is integrating all these issues from the start. So I think we've made progress. We've just started, we have a policies database. We've been compiling policies from all 194 member states of WHO to look at how if and how violence is being integrated into national health policies. And where is it located? Is it in, you know, with sexual and reproductive health, or is it somewhere else, or is it a standalone? So we will soon be able to give you a very concrete answer to this question. But, you know, we have progress, but we still have a long way to go. I'll stop there.
Fantastic. That database is going to be very helpful. One thing that we know at Apolitical, we're a global peer-to-peer learning network for people in government, is that there are pioneering men and women inside of government who really want to work on these issues. And sometimes they just need the model or the proof point in another place to say, hey, it worked here, and then sort of support to make that change. So it's really exciting, Claudia, and I personally want to know more about that and how to distribute that. And I'm sure other people would. They want to see where their country is at and how to bring together, as Claudia said, 3+5, right? The health piece and the women's piece. So thank you for that. Please feel free to folks to put observations or takeaways or questions in the chat, and we'll try to address them as we go. So I want to move over to the work at Breakthrough, Nanya, and I think most people know about the work. I think most people know WHO, but some people may not know the work of Breakthrough. Maybe just say a minute about what you do, and then talk about how you integrated violence against women and other components of SDG and your work. And if you could talk about what the evidence generated, because I know that's been a hallmark of the work of Breakthrough and such an important part of making the case for increased funding, so the role of evidence. So over to you. Thanks, Paramita, for this, yes, talking about VA-related laws are not taken seriously, so actually the enforcement piece. Over to you.
Thank you. So yeah, at Breakthrough, we work on norm change. And that's what excites me the most, because we believe that unless we change the norm, if you just change one behavior or the other, they're all going to roll back to a previous position, and the world is not going to change. So we focus on norm change around the culture that perpetuates violence against women and discrimination against women and girls by making it acceptable. So if you look at it, that Breakthrough's mission is to make violence and discrimination against women and girls unacceptable. So how do we do this? We do this by focusing on generational shift, which is why we focus on adolescents and young adults. And we work with a curriculum, which is a gender equity curriculum, which is rolled out in schools, also in the communities, and it is done both with boys and girls. So we do not segregate only boys or only girls, and we talk about gender attitude change. We talk about negotiations. We talk about identifying violence and discrimination in their own lives. So we have seen boys and girls identifying violence and discriminations in their own lives and going ahead and negotiating with their parents for a better world. And we have also seen, because we work with boys also, we have seen boys going ahead and talking in favor of the girls, their siblings, to the parents about their sports ground, about getting equal food or getting equal access to education. So this is something that encourages us a lot. And like you said, we work around evidence generation. So Breakthrough's work in the state of Haryana has been studied by JPAL through an RCT, randomized control trial, and it shows that there is gender attitude change among boys as well as among girls. Actually, the happy thing is that there is more gender attitude change among the boys who have gone through 2 years gender-based curriculum in the schools with Breakthrough. On the basis of this evidence, we are taking this curriculum to various state governments in India. Currently, we are working with the state government of Punjab. Incidentally, Punjab and Haryana in India have one of the worst gender indicators. One of the gender-based indicators is this, that the child sex ratio in Haryana and Punjab are the lowest. That means the girls per 1,000 boys are the lowest in Haryana and Punjab. So Punjab government has recognized gender-based violence and gender-based discrimination as one of the core issues to be taken up in the schools. And we are working with 4,500 teachers at this point in time, 4,500 schools at this point in time, to roll out the gender-based curriculum as part of the mainstream curriculum. That's how Breakthrough works. Our idea is now also to work with other state governments, and Breakthrough as an organization works in the ground in 5 states of India, covering about 17 districts. That's what we do, and we reach out to 500,000 adolescents. So there are 2 things that I would say that are not being given priority, and people are not recognizing these having very long-term implications even on SDGs and the development of the world as such. Like Paramita said, that if the world's 50% of people are women and girls, how can we not look at these things? So 2 things I want to table. One is this, that there is no discussion around marriage being an optional issue, as an option. It's still an end goal for the girls in South Asia, in many African countries. It's never presented to girls as an option. Like, like you can be a doctor, you can be a nurse, you can be this, you can marry, you cannot marry. That's not an option at all. So even with organizations like us, we somehow skirt the issue. We try to push the age of marriage, but marriage is still an end goal for girls. And this is going to be a big problem unless we can find a way of handling this. The second thing is, violence is justified in one way or the other. Like, if the girl has done this, if the girl was wearing this kind of clothes, if the girl was out at this hour, if the girl was talking like this, so violence is justified. So these are the 2 norms that are holding us behind. And Breakthrough and many other organizations in India, we constantly think and work around these norms in the community to change them. We see that the age of marriage negotiation is easier than to have a negotiation around who to marry and whether to marry or not. Yeah, this is something that we have still not been able to move. And it's going to be a big question around aspiration of girls. Girls are not going to be able to get into careers. So the reduced inequality idea of SDG 10, or for example, quality education of SDG 4 are not going to be achieved. Forget SDG 5 of gender equality. So these are the things that I wanted to table. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks for doing the intersection at the end, around education, around all of these. And I know we have a colleague, a shared colleague who's working on an infographic, unless other people have seen one, on how SDG 5, violence against women and girls, intersects with all these SDGs. So watch for Breakthrough, and I know I can tweet it, all of us will tweet it out so we can begin to tell the story visually. So thank you very much. Lots of richness and great data to share. So I don't know if you have any links you want to put in the chat. So we're getting near the end. I want to make sure that we hear from Sanam next. You remember in her beautiful background, she talked about systems change. So my question to you is, in your experience, how can systems change approach, which I find like it's a great concept, but I don't know if people know what that means, right? Like it can be quite complex, but how can it work to build those interconnections to break the silos? And have you found common levers? Because we heard this with Claudia as well, right? There are these silos, it's very hard to break. So over to you, Sanam.
Claudia and Nayana, because they've covered some of the issues of the silos and why it's important to have a systems change approach. Now, what do we mean by a systems change approach? When we look at violence against women or domestic violence, gender-based violence more broadly, it's a lot of the time the work, the interventions that we're doing are treating the symptom, not the cause. And by that, I mean that we have the counseling centers, we have the shelter, we have the legal system. I'm hearing some background sound, but I'm just going to keep going. I hope you can hear me clearly. And it's not actually addressing what's the cause of this violent relationship and the fact that we are permissive as a society of this widespread epidemic of violence, which UN Women even called the shadow pandemic during the COVID-19 crisis, because lockdown was forcing a lot of victims to be stuck with their perpetrators with no sort of break or way out. So when we talk about a system change approach, it's not just about making this issue a public health issue. It is about making it a cultural issue, something that we need to address in our traditions and attitudes, and to make it a political issue, to make it something that is on the public agenda. And when I go back to my example of us treating the symptom, by which we mean having outlets and sort of processes for having accountability when the violence is already happening, to look at how are we making women vulnerable, how are we forcing them into, as was mentioned by Nayana, as if marriage has to be the only way forward in life when you can lead a different type of life. And if we want to really talk about women having options to live their own lives, then we need to look at housing. We need to look at banking. We need to facilitate the kind of independence and strength so that they are not put in those vulnerable situations. A lot of you who are practitioners know that when somebody is facing domestic violence at home, the most dangerous moment is when they try to leave. And when we're in situations such as right now in the pandemic, a lot of the time police stations sent people back saying, come back after the lockdown. And that is the most dangerous moment that we should have thought of other ways and should have incorporated in the government response, in the emergency response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Even banking, as we know, and monetary systems can create violence. India a few years ago. I mean, now we're in one crisis that we may have amnesia about previous crises, but demonetization did cause domestic violence because women were hiding away for a rainy day, sums of money here and there for emergencies, right? And as soon as demonetization forced them to sort of bring out these hidden sums in the open, they faced violence for having hidden away money, and from the perspective of their family members who were angry at them, had committed some type of dishonesty. So you see that your banking system, your financial system, your the whole sort of ambit of our human rights agenda needs to take on this issue. And that's why, when we talk about SDG 5 being cross-cutting, it needs to be more than just a women's issue. When we talk about domestic violence, when we talk about violence against women, it needs to be more than a development issue. And every aspect of the SDGs really looks at that. Whether we talk about climate change making women and girls more vulnerable and driving up child marriage rates. In my own country, for example, in Bangladesh, that is data that exists. When we talk about other aspects of public health, again, climate change, and if we want to bring in health and poverty as well, SDG 1, and we have data showing that the increased salinity in the south of Bangladesh has actually increased high blood pressure rates for communities, and that has had a direct relationship with the amount of miscarriages that women are having. So you see that it's a really broad issue, and to come to your point about common levers, I think one thing that I feel like I've said so many times in different intergovernmental spaces is participatory gender budgeting. And a lot of the time people latch on to gender budgeting and they're just like, oh, we do that. We add gender as a line on the budget. We spend this much money on gender issues, but that's not it. Participatory gender budgeting means that you get everybody together to assess how much every part of every action, every policy really needs, and then come to a consensus about how much that spending can be done. We have a great pilot example that's very well known at the municipality level in Penang, where they involved the community to decide how their budget needed to be spent and what projects the community wanted. And what we see, it would be really brilliant if ministries of finance actually did this kind of exercise with all other ministries and stop treating ministries of the gender missionaries, the Ministry of Women and Children, the ministries of gender equality, whatever the entity is in your country. Those gender missionaries are often treated on the sideline as not in for consultation on the national budget, so that they can really talk about these issues and not just limited to just SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights. I always use the abbreviations, or gender-based violence specifically, because like I said, we don't want to just treat the symptom. We want to change the overall system so that our educational system is challenging stereotypes, is giving proper good information about sexual health for adolescents, for young people at the appropriate ages. And we want we want all kinds of access and opportunity so that women are not put in positions where other people have power over them. And yeah, I feel like I've gone over a lot, but I really wanted to say all those things. Thanks, Lisa.
No worries. And I think I felt the passion and the rigor in which you're doing your work. And I'm sure many people would be interested in hearing these case studies about participatory gender budgeting. It's critical, and I'd love to learn more about it. So if there's anything in the chat you'd like to put in, because this is a bridge, Radha, to you, because money does matter. And the Ford Foundation cares a lot and has really put at the center thinking about women's rights and women's agency. And I know that's very important to Radha and her colleagues at Ford, and really listening to women. So Radha, I'm going to turn it over to you as our last 3-minute intervention or insights on this intersectional question and what trends you're seeing in philanthropy. Not putting Ford on the spot at all, but a lot of the challenges in these silos can be when they fund education, they fund health, they fund this, and I know your approach is really a bit different. So what are the trends and what are you seeing and what still needs to happen? Radha, over to you.
Thanks, Lisa. It's difficult to follow on from such an impassioned intervention by Sanam, and it's exactly the kind of work that we're trying to support through the Ford Foundation. So as a foundation, we're working to address the systems and structures that drive inequality in all its forms, and we believe that gender inequality and violence against women and girls are inextricably linked. But our strategy is based on an understanding really of why, despite greater attention to the issue and more resources, why this is still an endemic problem. And so our analysis has identified specific challenges associated with who's defining the priorities related to violence against women work, where those resources were being directed, the type of approaches that are being supported, and who's being left out. So, as well as a sort of fragmented response. So, from our perspective, we see our role as philanthropy particularly at different levels. Firstly, through targeted investments to those women's rights organizations and movements who are working on the front lines to address violence against women and girls, so that their experience and their voices are lifted up. The SDG 5 on achieving gender equality and eliminating violence against women and girls was achieved partly as a result of tireless advocacy and campaigning by feminist and women's rights organizations. And so we believe that they have to be at the center of investments and policy development, which is why we put women and the feminist approaches at the center of our strategy. And we also believe that we in philanthropy can use our position to influence where investments are directed, and analysis by the OECD, as well as women's funds, have consistently highlighted the imbalances in financing to address violence against women and girls, which is disproportionately going to global north organizations. So in our strategy, we're trying to influence resources that are going to global south, or feminist movements and women's rights organizations. We also believe that we can advance a global conversation so that the work to prevent violence and respond to violence is adequately resourced as a long-term commitment and not just a kind of fly-by-night trending topic. And we believe that in partnership with our grantees, we can drive solutions from the bottom up based on the experiences and the evidence of partners on the ground. And foundations like ours that are working both at global and local levels can play a role in connecting that local knowledge and context, because context matters. And we shouldn't be relying on taking a particular approach in one context that works and applying it in another. And so we believe we can play a role in building some of those connections. And perhaps most importantly, I think in terms of our strategy, we also believe that it's our role to make visible the experiences and voices of marginalized women and girls who are marginalized and subject to violence and discrimination because of their race, their disability, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation. So we take a very unapologetic intersectional lens to our work. But we also know that we can't do this alone, and we have to come together to solve big global and regional problems, not necessarily as the main act, but in supporting others, and that we don't always have the answers, and we must partner with others who know more and who bring different perspectives. So we have a role to play in helping to coordinate, to avoid duplication, to build relationships, forge alliances, so that we bring together multiple actors, particularly at a time when there are now many more actors on the landscape involved and wanting to address this issue, and potentially new funding. So so I think now more than ever we see that the kind of interconnections of issues that Sanam has so powerfully explained, and how a global problem such as this can't be addressed in a siloed way, that we need to integrate health, human rights, the economy, gender, education, and the environment, and look at those as in an integrated way, and make those connections. Thank
Radha, thank you. As you were talking, I don't know if you were watching the chat at the same time, but there's a question going on around money and power and the role of men and money and power. And I know this is critical. Tomorrow we're hosting a session around politics and the role of politics and power. And you all know that the biggest part of the gender gap in the world is the number of women in politics. So we have a lot of work there to do to balance out who spends 40% of GDP that government spends. Is it just men, or the role of women in that? So I want to thank everyone for this rich conversation. Can everyone go back to that gallery view and put into the chat what your one word takeaway or feeling? We're at the top of the hour on this. One word takeaway or feeling. I also encourage people to tweet out why you think or you learned or something you heard ending violence against women and girls helps achieve the SDGs. Let's, if we can, get this going out to our networks. It's so important that we don't speak to ourselves, that we reach those other people. So let's do one word takeaway. Everyone at one time will create a wall, a work in progress. Thanks, Mohammed. A wall of takeaways or feelings. Motivated. Thanks, Claudia. How are other people feeling? And then turn on your cameras and fundamental, continued, and recalling. Let's wave goodbye to everyone. Thank you for your work. Remember to take care of yourself. You are a great asset to ending violence against women and girls. So take care of yourself in all of this. Follow many of us on Twitter who tweet about these things on a regular basis to stay in touch and share successes and challenges with one another. There is a 3-minute survey if you want to click on that. Troubling pervasive resolve. Go ahead and check out a networking space that we have at Catalyst 2030. And there's a part of a community. Resolve. That's a great way to end this. So a lot to do with Resolve, a lot to do. So with that, I want to say goodbye to everyone. And one more wave, loving wave to everyone. See you in these circles, and let's keep each other motivated. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.